Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to my 36th episode of Chess Trap. Well, in this episode I'm going to show you a wonderful trap in the Fritz variation from the black perspective. The opening arises after the following move order: e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, knight to f6, and now white plays this aggressive setup starting with knight to g5, attacking on weak f7 spot. Okay, black response is almost forced. He has to play d5, and after e captures d5, the most popular choice here is knight to a5, which leads to a big theoretical line. However, I am going to propose here a very tricky Fritz variation which start with knight to d4. And this move already sets up a cunning trap. Now, before we move on, the important point I like to mention that if your opponent continue at this point with the move c3, then you should respond with b5, and you can check out the database as well as theory section, which will give you a very good idea how to play against the main line. However, if you are playing against a practical player or your students are playing district or state level tournaments such as under 7, under 9 or under 12, then this trap is worth to show them, as many players has made this blunder, namely d6, which is so natural. White is renewing the threat on f7, and now it seems like it is very difficult to defend on f7. Funny enough, in the database there are more than 300 games played from this position, and the highest ELO trap is a Grandmaster rated 2500. So isn't that amazing? Anyways, let's see what is wrong with this beautiful move, as black plays the equally cunning move queen captures d6, telling white, do your worst on f7. There are two ways white can capture on f7, but let's look at the first worst option, which is again most oftenly played, namely knight captures f7, attacking two big guys. And what can be the more natural than this? Well, believe it or not, white is completely busted after this move. Yup, you heard it right, as black has this wonderful resource, queen to c6, attacking the bishop as well as the g2 pawn, and now suddenly white is feeling the heat from this position. Okay, white has few options, but first of all, let's look at the worst one, as if your opponent become greedy and capture the rook on the h8, then this is the last time he is going to do it, as after queen captures g2, attacking the rook, rook to f1, and now can you see the winning move? Yup, it's bishop to g4, and white can pack his bag and go home. The only response is f3, but after bishop captures f3, rook captures f3, and the move knight captures f3 check, white king doesn't have any hiding square, so white has to give up the queen. And even after this, you can easily see white has two minor pieces against the queen and a pawn, which is never going to be enough in a practical game. Well, the second option white can try over here is to defend this bishop either with d3, b3, or even knight captures e5, which is somewhat more critical. But even after this, black move order doesn't change, as he is going to take on g2, and after rook to f1, yes, this time around our bishop cannot come to g4, But white has other problem to solve, namely queen to e4 check. Okay, white response is force. He has to block with the bishop. But now you will see the cute point behind this check, as again we are going to nab the white queen with this deciding blow. Yup, you already see it, right? Bam! So again and again in this line, black is winning the white queen in an outright fashion. So finally, if queen captures g2 is that much harassing, why not castle on the king side and diffuse all black threats? So white's idea is very simple. If you take the bishop, then he will take the rook in the corner, and white can have a good middle game. But guess what? Still this is not enough, as after queen captures bishop, knight captures rook. Yes, for the time being, white is an exchange up, but see yourself, as knight captures c2, ruin all hopes, as white is also losing the rook in the corner. Well, white can wriggle with some moves like d3, queen to c6, and now knight to c3. But after knight captures a1, we have a unique scenario where both the knights are sitting in the corner, but not so surprisingly, black emerge with extra piece and a better position. Okay, so if your opponent plays knight captures f7, then writing is on the wall. So some wise player come up with this bishop check, which obviously misplaced the black king. But surprisingly enough, again in this line, it is only white who is having huge problems. First of all, here black has the obvious threat, namely h6 and the two of white pieces hanging. And white bishop cannot go to c4, as queen to c6 leads to the same trappy territory. So white response is force. White has to play bishop to b3. So if allowed, then knight to f7 is now definitely on the card. But this is what I like about this variation. From now onwards, every move is forcing, and the sequence start with knight captures b3, a captures b3. Obviously white want to open up the rook on the a file. Now you play h6, kicking this knight back to f3, followed by e4, attacking this knight one more time. If queen to e2, then king to f7, and white has to move the knight anyways. So accordingly, the best response here is knight goes back to his original square, namely g1. And now you can continue with king to f7. As I have highlighted over here, black has a very effective plan of campaign, namely queen to e5, followed by bishop to d6, rook to e8, and if it's required, then king can do the artificial castle with king to g8. And you will be very surprised that this setup is so effective against any white response. Now, to understand the potential of this simple plan, I like to show you one of my quickest win against a 2300 rated opponent, where at this position, he continued with knight to c3. As I have shown, I continue with queen to e5. He responded with knight to e2, and indeed, bishop to d6 comes into the picture immediately, which stopped white to castle. Okay, my opponent responded with d4. I capture with n%, and he captured back with the queen. Now comes the third step. Yup, you already know it. Rook to e8, pressurizing the e2 knight. And accordingly, my opponent quickly find out that castling on the king side is never going to be a possibility. So he played bishop to d2 in order to castle on the queen side. But you can see white's setup is so passive, and with the two bishop pair, I get the charge immediately with bishop to f5 attacking the queen, queen to c4 check, and now simple move king to f8. After the as expected castle on the queen side, now comes the move which you have to remember, and this is such a wonderful move which gives black a completely upper hand in the game. Are you ready? b5. So obviously white can't take on b5 as the end of the sequence e2 knight hangs, and what this move does is it clearly get the initiative on the queen side, which is very hard to defend. See yourself how quickly my opponent perished. In the game, white played queen to f4, trying to exchange queen, but first b4 comes, so white can't exchange the queen and he has to address the knight. Okay, he played knight to a4, and his idea is very obvious. If I take his knight now, then he will take my bishop, and again resulting position is somewhat better for white. But to his horror, at this point I gave him this rude shock, and this kind of tactical possibilities are always exist in this line. Black has this deciding blow. Bishop captures c2. Bam! Well, the idea is very obvious. When white captures this piece, we come in with queen captures e2, not only regaining the piece but attacking the queen. And not to forget, it is now white whose king looks a bit shaky. Well, wisely enough, my opponent continued with queen to f3, but after queen takes, pawn takes, and the move rook to e2, the dust is clear, and one can easily see not only black has regained his all material, but that two sets of double pawn gives white a great headache in the endgame. Practically speaking, this is a completely losing position for the white camp. That's it guys, I hope you enjoy and learn this wonderful trap in the Fritz variation. Remember, when your opponent plays the move d6, allow him to capture on f7 with queen captures d6, and no matter however white capture on f7, the full point is awaiting for you on the board. Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment, and I will meet you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care.